When I heard they had arrested a suspect in the Idaho murders, the first person I called is this guy. And that's why he's the fastest rebooked guest on What's Wrong with Orny Adams. I welcome back former FBI profiler, TV producer, current TV writer, and one hell of a podcaster himself, Jim Clemente. Welcome back.
How you doing, Orny? It's always great to see you, man.
Yeah.
I literally, I'm serious. I get a charge when I see you. You have this energy that really, I don't know. It's great. It's wonderful.
Likewise.
And I'm glad that you have been peppering me with questions. And so we decided, right, that we might as well do an additional or a, what do you call it? A recall podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you're the first one, but I feel like we should update my listeners with what's been going on. And I like to think, can you validate this about me?
We'll see.
I like to think I ask questions that the other people aren't asking you.
Well, the other people being news meter, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You ask questions that are off the charts, different, but important, insightful, and they get to the heart of the matter.
Thank you.
Right? They're not just let's have sound bites. Let's have sound bites. You're actually interested in finding out what's going on. And to the extent I can enlighten you, I'm happy to. So
great. I think we should start by, and I think you'll agree, commending the Moscow Police Department for their work. And maybe it's a lesson to the people to be a little bit more patient.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Moscow Police Department, a small police department, but they actually were doing their job, and they were working with state police, and they were working with other police organizations and the FBI, and they did not care to indulge, let's say, the media and even parents of the victims who were attacking them for not having solved the case right away. In fact, we know now that they were making major progress for a long time, and they had to actually collect evidence so that when they did make an arrest, that arrest would stick and they'd be able to prosecute the actual killer.
Yeah.
So now that we know that, you're right, we should commend them and the other agencies that were involved, including the FBI, because it was a team effort. And thanks to people in the community, thanks to people in that house, thanks to neighbors, they had enough evidence to identify, track down, and arrest the offender. Now, you'll notice I'm not saying his name, and I appreciate that you're not saying his name, because to us in law enforcement, it is not, we don't like to make a big thing of the name of the offender, because unfortunately, that just encourages other people who want recognition to do outrageously violent crimes in order to get in, the public's eye.
Let's say
they should be canceled. Okay. They should be canceled.
Let's say these four names, the victims: Ethan, Madison, Zaina, and Kaylee, who unfortunately died in this event.
Well, they were murdered. Yeah, it was not a passive event, and that's something that somebody decided that he was going to kill people, and for his own entertainment purposes, apparently. And we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I want to get into all that. I do want to go back to what you were talking about a second ago, which is what I think is problematic nowadays, but also sort of helpful in a way.
What's that?
Internet sleuths, these online detectives. I know somebody, I interviewed him on this podcast. His name's Morbid, and he was falsely accused of a murder that happened downtown, or a death at the Cecil Hotel. And he absolutely could not have been there. If these people had done the research, they would have known that he was in Mexico at the time, but they just ruined his life. So what is the net result of these so-called online detectives that get involved in these cases to law enforcement?
Let me tell you, there are a number of cases in which people in the community have helped. I mean, the most publicized example probably in the recent few years has been Don't F with Cats. And that was a case of two people. I've met them since. I've had them on my podcast. Amazing people who decided that they didn't like what they saw, that this guy was dangerous. They started warning law enforcement. The guy ends up becoming a murderer, and they were critical in actually locating him and getting him arrested. How did they do it? They were sitting behind their own computers in their own locations. They didn't even they never had physically met with each other,
right,
but they were cooperating with each other. They were going through Google Earth, and they were walking up and down streets. They saw a picture that the offender had posted, noticed that there was a staircase and a particular type of street light behind him. They believed that that was in a particular city, I believe in Canada.
mm-hmm.
And so they literally went on Google Earth and scrolled and walked down the streets until they found that staircase,
right,
that lamppost.
yeah.
And guess what? The offender's apartment building was in the background. And that's how they identify who he was, where he lived, and so on and so forth.
Are law enforcement frustrated by these people most of the time? Or
no,
okay.
No, I don't think so. The only time it becomes a problem
mm-hmm.
is when those people attack other people, when those people take a little shred of or thread of evidence and then make broad sweeping conclusions and expect law enforcement to jump on those, when law enforcement actually has to follow the law, and they cannot do certain inquiries without reasonable suspicion. Right. They can't do higher level inquiries without probable cause, and they can't arrest someone without probable cause. They can't search a location without consent or probable cause.
Are you saying we should get rid of the FBI and law enforcement and leave it to the online people? Is that what you're saying, Jim Clemente? This is very...
Orny, I really am concerned about you.
I'm shocked.
I'm very concerned about the fact that you could take what I just finished saying and turn it into that mess, because that is not what I'm saying at all. I mean, by far, no, what I'm saying is law enforcement has to follow laws.
Right.
Of course, they're happy to get the help of people in the community. The community actually is in every space on this planet, not law enforcement. Law enforcement is a limited number of people, about 500,000 in the United States, including local, state, and federal agents. So there's hundreds of millions of humans here. Right. So obviously they're the eyes and ears of law enforcement, and you're talking to a bunch of them. You're telling them, you can tell them, you're in a position to tell them that they are in a position to help, as long as they don't attack people, as long as they don't turn it into something like vigilanteism.
Got it. Okay, let's get off of that, because let's talk about this case. But I want to bring up something that I found very interesting that you told me the other night at dinner. You said there are only around 50 FBI profilers in the history of the Bureau, correct?
Yeah, sure. Well, in the beginning, there was only 3, and then they grew to 5. And then eventually, when I got into it, there was about 25. And, you know, my generation of profilers is now retired, and there's another 25 in there. So it's sort of, it literally took a long time. I mean, maybe 50 is low. There are only 50 retired FBI profilers. And of course, you know, some of my good friends and mentors have passed away, but those people and the institutional knowledge that they created in the behavioral analysis unit is just going to go on forever. There's just so much information that we learned. The original profilers interviewed 38 serial offenders in prison, got incredibly detailed information about their motivations, why they did what they did, how they did what they did, and how we can now use that to reverse engineer back to who they were, who committed those crimes. Well, when I left the BAU, I think the number of interviews was up to about 1,500. And that was over a decade ago now.
Is this something, and this debate goes on in comedy all the time, is this something that is innate in a person to have the ability to be a profiler, or is this something that can be learned?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's art and science. Okay, so the science you have to learn, but the art is, I think, innate. Just like in your profession, I mean, anybody can tell a joke. Not everyone can make you laugh when they tell that joke, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know. People seem to be able to imitate and get up on stage and do stuff.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually funny, that they actually can hold an audience. Right. I mean, that's a skill.
Right.
right?
Of course.
And some of that is innate, and some of it is sort of a science. There are
Mhm.
certain things. Do you know, by the way, the science behind what makes people laugh?
I don't. I
I'll
don't.
tell you because I learned it.
Okay.
It's your brain expecting one result
Mm.
and getting another that also makes sense, and your brain kicks in laughter.
By the way, that's the exact same definition of insanity. It's
Really?
expecting one result, getting another, and then doing it over and over and over. So
I
this
think
makes
that was the
sense.
thing. That was the
I
thing.
think that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So, well, that's why I did say that you were insanely funny, didn't I?
Yes, you
I mean,
did.
that pretty much
Which I took
says it all.
personally. Which I took
Good.
personally.
I'm glad you took it
Listen, my
personally.
mom's got questions too, so we got to get
Your
into
mom.
this.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We're getting your whole family involved.
Yeah.
I've already answered your dad's questions. Now your mom.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first I'm
Yeah.
hearing of your
Yeah.
mom. So wow, this is amazing. I
Yeah.
feel like this is a breakthrough moment
Oh,
in our professional relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, thanks for making time. I know you're so busy, and I
pretty
really
busy.
appreciate this.
And you're fighting laryngitis over there.
I
So,
know, but we got to do
you
this.
sound actually cooler when you're laryngitis.
Yeah, it's my hot voice.
So
all right, let's go over some of the texts
talk
I
about
was
your
sending
mom.
you yesterday.
Okay.
And then we'll
sure.
talk about my mom.
All right.
This was the first text I sent you. It seems like you'd need some decent knife skills to kill 4 people. And one of the Idaho victims, Ethan, was a big guy. Do you subscribe to this theory that you have to have good knife skills?
Well, good knife skills. I do. When I profiled the case, I did say that I think the person who did this crime was likely a male in his 20s or 30s who has hunting or fishing in his background, something where he used a knife, so he's comfortable with a knife because he chose that as his weapon of choice. I do believe that he had some familiarity with using a knife, but he killed 4 people, but not all at the same time. He didn't control the scene. He went from bedroom to bedroom, and actually there was an eyewitness who saw him leaving the premises. So he was not a sophisticated criminal. I don't think he's used a knife before in a crime.
Okay.
I wanted to make that distinction.
Okay.
However, he killed, and again, I feel my heart goes out to the families and friends of these victims, and I'm not trying to be graphic or crass. What I'm trying to do is explain to people so they understand, so they can help protect themselves and their loved ones. So just one more factor about that is that the people were in 2 different locations in the building. So he attacked 2 people who were likely asleep, and then attacked 2 other people. So when he was a 6'2" guy, and he had the advantage of surprise and intent, and I'm sure that his adrenaline was pumping, and I think he had extra strength as a result of that, and he had a definite intent to kill. And obviously the people he killed were not a threat to him. They did not intend him any harm, and therefore they were shocked, and unfortunately they lost their lives.
How good was your score at profiling? Like, what did you nail it?
Well, not 100%, because, well, what I said was, I told you a few aspects. I said that this person either had a relationship with one or more people inside that house,
and did he,
or he had pre-attack surveillance and possibly stalking one or more people in that house. And we have confirmed so far the second half of that, that he did conduct pre-attack surveillance and basically was stalking, was his phone was in locations where some of the victims' phones were over the course of the weeks and months before the attack. And apparently he had been stalking a number of different college campuses and a number of different people, and decided to attack this particular.
How do you know that he was stalking other people on other campuses?
Well, that's all part of the
affidavit.
That's all part of the, well, it's part of the affidavit and the information.
But you have information, I know this for a fact, that we don't have from talking to colleagues. So how do you?
I hope I don't make a mistake and say something that I shouldn't.
What the other day you said there's a word for somebody that gets a job that allows them to fulfill a dark fantasy.
Yeah, sure. That's called sublimation. So what happens sometimes is that people realize that they have a a negative side, a very bad or dark side, and they find a profession or job that will allow them to indulge this dark fantasy, these negative things, and make it look legitimate. But they're actually satisfying an inner need. For example, you could say, imagine a person who is sadistic, who likes causing and witnessing the pain and suffering of others. That person perhaps becoming a dentist, because a lot of people are afraid of the dentist and are in pain when they're being treated by the dentist. So
or a casting director.
Sadistic, or a casting director. There you go.
I was trying to think of something.
But somebody, and another way to look at it is somebody who has a lust for murder, somebody who wants to kill people, volunteering for the military simply so he can or she can carry out that.
You know what I just realized? Do we have to worry that there are a lot of murderers and killers and people like this in law enforcement?
Well, I don't know, because when you're law enforcement would be more of a control thing than it would be for a murder thing, because the fact is that although there are celebrated cases, the number of law enforcement people who actually end the lives of other people during the course of their careers is a small percentage of law enforcement officers. It's not like it is everyone.
Right.
I mean, I told you the story the other day. The only time I ever actually fired my weapon when I was an FBI agent, and I was in for 22 years, was to kill a rabid fox that was attacking me.
Right.
So, that's generally the experience of FBI agents.
Your
they
life
don't
just
fire their weapon.
Yeah.
I know my life is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're also what we call, an office guy. You know what I mean? Okay. You're. No, we're not really. Jim Clemente, you were out in the field?
Of course I was out in the field. Right, I mean, I did bank robberies. My first job in the
Wait a minute, you did bank robberies, or you?
Well, that's what we say in law enforcement. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah.
That's what we say when we talk about the cases that we investigated. So there were 2,000 bank robberies in New York City in my first year in the FBI. Right. And so we were responding to at least six bank robberies a day.
Do people rob banks anymore, or is it just all online?
Well, they still rob banks, sure.
All right, let's go through the speed round here. Do you think he has killed before?
I do not think he has killed before.
Okay. Do you think he would have killed again?
It's possible if he got away with it. I think that he had plans. In the BAU, we talk about serial killing. First of all, it's 2 or more murders in separate incidents to become a serial killer. By congressional definition, it's 3 or more, but in the BAU, we use 2 or more. We see it more as a qualitative than just a quantitative analysis. We look at the nature, the intent, the lack of motive other than a desire to kill. And so these kind of internal motivations take it away from what the standard is in terms of murder investigations, which is somebody in the circle of family and friends is typically the killer. So when you see somebody who's been murdered, you look at the people around them, and that's generally where you're going to find the murderer. But in serial cases, that mold is broken because many times they just set a trap, and whoever falls into that net, that's who they kill.
Interesting. Just serial killers.
Well, yeah. I mean, because they do it more often. Yeah.
Okay. Would he admit if he had killed before?
It depends. I mean, we interviewed a number, obviously, many hundreds now of serial offenders, and some of them are sex offenders, some of them are serial murderers, some of them are single murders that had very behaviorally rich crimes. Let me put it that way. And in those interviews, we've gotten them to admit a tremendous amount of information about their motivations and their history and what they actually did. So I would expect that post-conviction, he will probably admit a lot. And and it's possible that he will admit.
Excuse me.
And it's possible that in an effort to get a plea deal, that he might admit more now.
Do you think there is a part of him that is excited or relieved that he is now getting credit for this crime?
Well, I want to twist that a little bit.
I'm sorry, I'm asking the questions.
I know, but I'm answering them. And what I'll say is, I do believe that he spent a great deal of time fantasizing about this in advance and was excited by the possibility.
Is there a sexual component to this?
Well, it's a non-traditional sexual component, but yes, I think what motivated him was he got off on the thought of having that power over somebody to take their lives, to put them in fear, and to up close and personal end their lives.
Will he fantasize about this in prison while he masturbates?
Well, like I said, I believe that might have happened before, and certainly there's no reason why it wouldn't happen in the future.
Okay. Let's discuss what my mom is interested in.
Okay.
When he was exiting the crime scene, he walked past one of the roommates who saw him in dark clothing and fuzzy eyebrows and wearing a mask. She locked herself in the bedroom. Why wouldn't somebody like that? All of us are thinking, I would go check on my roommates. I'd be curious what this person's doing in my house. And I would certainly go check. And if I'm too afraid to check, call 911. Why do you think this person, and I don't want to make this person feel worse than they may already feel, but what?
Okay, well,
and also, and this is
possibilities.
And by the way, and here's yeah, go ahead.
She could have been in shock. That's one thing. Two, this was 4 a.m, a little after 4 a.m. And I'm not sure if she's the one, but one of these women in this house ordered food delivered at 4 a.m. It's possible that person was the one who had food delivered, and she might have thought that the guy was delivering food to somebody else in the house.
But she locked herself in the room in fear.
That doesn't
mean her instinct said something.
Her instincts may have said something, but that doesn't mean that she hasn't had that same instinct hundreds of times. In the course of college, women, unfortunately, men don't get this that much, but I'm sure it happens, but women do get creeped out. There's a lot of guys who hit on women and really creep them out and really cause them to feel fear or uneasy, at least, or anxiety. And that may be her reaction to that. It may have been the 15th time that it happened in the last year. Who knows? I don't know exactly what was going through her mind. We need to wait and let her explain what her actions were. But I will say this. This is post-COVID. A lot of people wear masks.
Well, do we know if it was that kind of mask?
I don't know what kind of mask it was. I wasn't there. But I do know that people wear masks, and a variety of different types of masks. But clearly, we know now that this was an attempt, a forensic countermeasure to try to hide his identity. Well, he failed miserably because he didn't cover his bushy eyebrows, and he couldn't cover his height, and he didn't cover how he was dressed. And all those things can lead back to evidence that can convict him of a crime. This guy was not a sophisticated criminal. He may have planned this. He may have thought he was a super villain, but he clearly wasn't. He screwed up badly. I want
to talk about that. But first, I just want to say this. I subscribe to Gavin DeBecker's theory, Gift of Fear, which he explained in the book Gift of Fear. He said, if you feel something, if somebody's walking towards you and you feel something and you say, I got to get away, I got to get to the other side of the street, your brain, your subconscious is making so many calculations that you should listen to it. Okay?
Really?
Yep.
Where have you heard that before? I don't know anybody who says stuff like that.
So like maybe you saw this person on a wanted poster somewhere, maybe whatever it is, get across the street. I just want to say that. I want to know this.
Absolutely.
This is the killer, excuse me, suspected killer is what we call an organized offender. Okay? For somebody, you're proud of me, aren't you?
Well,
look at you. Yeah. I came through with something.
I feel I can retire now. You can just take over. You can just do this on your own now.
What?
An organized offender. So what does that mean?
He went into the crime scene. He had a game plan, and he made a lot of mistakes. What mistakes did he make?
Okay, but that's not the organized offender. Let me just define that for you. So an organized offender is somebody who fantasizes about committing the crime and plans the crime in advance, brings the implements necessary to commit the crime, and gets away with it.
That's exactly what I just said.
No, not quite. But and then you can play back the thing. You can play back the recording, and takes away the evidence with him. Now, he didn't do that. He left the sheath of his knife, which contained his DNA thumbprint on the snap of the sheath. And that's how they were able to identify him. He left it on the bed of one of the victims.
Okay, and they keep saying they identified this guy through his DNA. How did they have his DNA?
Well, that thumbprint contains cells from his thumb, which can be used. You only need 2 or 3 cells.
But how did they...
They extract DNA from it.
I get that, but is he in a database or something?
No, he wasn't in a database. So then they followed him. They probably went through his trash, and they got something he threw away, and then they matched the DNA from the thumbprint to the DNA in the garbage where he was residing.
Got it. So he was a suspect already. Then they matched the DNA. This wasn't like he was in a...
That confirmed who it was.
Okay.
Yes. They had him as a suspect, probably, I think, most likely because of the car. I think they identified... Well, all these things are happening at once. They're not done in a vacuum.
When did he know he was caught?
Well, when they put the cuffs on him, I'm sure. But I think he probably also, had a butthole tightening experience when he saw the picture of the car similar to the one he was driving. Like, that's a bad situation.
Because I read this. He received a new license plate for the Elantra 5 days after the killings, the affidavit said, citing the records from the Washington State Department of Licensing. So he must have suspected something.
I don't know if he applied for that before or after. But remember, he planned for
a lot of stuff. So I just convict him.
He could have, all right, but he could have applied for that before, and it just got delivered 5 days after.
Smart.
But this was his intent, obviously, to register the car in a different state. So, but here's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, he used his own vehicle to commit this crime.
Mistake 1.
He left the area shortly after committing this crime. That was another thing that I said.
Left the state. Yep.
Right. He turned his cell phone. He had his cell phone on when he began the journey to the crime scene. He turned it off before he got near it and turned it back on shortly after the crime was committed.
Right. So
why would somebody now either turned it off or on, or he put it into airplane mode? I'm not sure, but it wasn't pinging on any towers during that time period. But specifically during the time period of pre-attack surveillance and the crime being committed, that time his phone wasn't pinging on towers, but before and after it was.
Right.
Explain that. Why would you turn your phone off? Why would you do something to mask your location of your phone unless that was a forensic countermeasure? That's what I believe it was.
Is that circumstantial evidence? Is that circumstantial?
It is circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, nobody shuts their phones off nowadays. We have 5 minutes left, Jim.
Okay, well,
what other mistakes?
See if I can answer some more of your mother's question.
What other mistakes did he make?
What other mistakes he made?
Do you think he's shocked that he got caught?
I think the realization hit him during the course of the crime itself that he was in way over his head, because everything else was theoretical and nothing ever goes according to fantasy. Now, you asked me earlier, would he do it again? If he had gotten away with this, he would continue to fantasize about it. And he would think, okay, next time I've learned more. Next time I'll do it this way. Next time I'll fix this. And it would still not go exactly right. So what happens is in their fantasies, everything is perfect. And I believe he got off sexually by fantasizing about being able to murder these people or somebody like them. He fit them into his fantasy, but it didn't work because again, he walks into this place. There were 6 adults. And I said when I profiled it, you don't walk into a place with 6 live adults occupying this dwelling without taking a huge risk, because any one of them could have had their phone out and taken a picture, could have could have called 911, could have had a weapon themselves.
Right.
So many things could have happened.
Why didn't he kill the eyewitness on the way out?
He may have been, I don't know, he may have been wiped out. So what happens is you get this huge influx of adrenaline, right? And you get this super strength during the commission of this crime. But what happens is then it goes away. Right. And you're literally wiped out, completely wiped out. And what happens is a lot of times is people pass out. There's times when people, after committing murders, multiple murders, will open a refrigerator and drink some orange juice or eat a banana, something, because they feel like they're going to pass out. Right. And so he may have been in that state. He also may have been focused on one or two particular victims. And when he got to those victims and killed them, he stopped. So there's a lot that could happen.
Yeah, but you always kill the eyewitnesses, at least in the movies. What did you see?
Oh, come on.
Did you see his court appearance?
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
Okay, because I was curious if there's anything you can tell from his body language.
No, I didn't. To me, once he's caught, it's like I don't want to know his name. I don't want to know anything more about him. To me, he's a foul excuse for humanity. He's people are calling him evil and so forth. I always say, if you call somebody evil, you're trying to give them more power than they actually had. He's a bad person. He's an ignorant, bad person. He did horrible things.
How sure are you that he is the killer?
Well, I feel very confident, given what they've published and what I know about the crime scene and the crime itself, that there's no question that he actually committed these crimes.
Do you think his family and friends suspect that he would ever have done this? Do you think that they're going to now come out and say, well, he was killing animals when he was younger? He drew these pictures in class. Or is this a complete blindsided shock?
I know a number of people have come forward and said he was quiet and he made people feel uncomfortable and things like that. Maybe he was a disenfranchised kind of person, and those are probably risk factors. You're talking about the homicidal triad we used to use, which is cruelty to animals, bedwetting, and fire setting. And that used to be used as an indicator. Of course, now we have many more indicators in the violent risk factor list. But feeling disenfranchised is a high risk factor. Obviously, this guy attempted to become a police officer. He wanted to put himself in a position of power. He probably felt very diminished in terms of his own personality, and he wanted to feel powerful. And the way he did that was fantasizing about killing people, innocent, helpless people, and making them in fear of their life, and then ending their lives in a brutal way. And that's a disgusting thing to fantasize about. And any of your listeners, anybody's out there hearing it, if you feel yourself sexually attracted to violence, you need to get help. You need to get help right away, because that is a horrific thing to do. And you have no right ever to do anything like that to anybody else.
Jim Clemente, I want to thank you for coming on, for being, for helping me understand this. You're a tremendous guest. You've become a friend. And
of course.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. I wish we had more time to talk about it. Once again, we took a 10-minute interview and made it 40 minutes. We did it again. Thank you, Jim Clemente.
Well, I do have a 4 o'clock, so I got to jump. But anytime, Orny, I love talking to you. I love your brain. The rest of you, I'm not sure about, but your brain, I really love. It's great.
Thank you.
It's great interacting with you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right.